Thank you, sir. Today's first presenter is Mr. Todd Henry. He teaches leaders and organizations how to establish practices that lead to everyday brilliance. He is the author of 4 books entitled The Accidental Creative, Die Empty, Louder Than Words, and Herding Tigers. And you know that you're successful as an author when your works have been translated into more than 15 languages. Mr. Henry speaks and consults across dozens of industries on creativity, leadership, and passion for work. His book, Die Empty, was named by Amazon as one of the best books of 2013, and his latest work, entitled Herding Tigers, is about how to be the leader that creative people need. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Todd Henry.
Well, hello, my brilliant friends. It is great to be here to join you in the great Alabama tundra. What the heck is going on with the weather? I left Cincinnati thinking, oh, I'm going south. It's going to be great. It's going to be nice and warm, and it's great to receive a nice tundra welcome. I've spent the last decade of my life studying creativity and innovation, but a very specific kind of creativity. Creativity among those who have to go to work every day, who have to solve problems. How many of you solve problems every day as a function of what you do? How many of you solve other people's problems every day? Okay, one final question. How many of you had a specific person in mind when I asked that last question? Yeah, right? That's what we do. As create-on-demand professionals, that's what we do. And there's no more create-on-demand job than what you do. When you are in leadership, you are solving problems every single day. But with that comes a unique set of pressures, a unique set of dynamics, and especially when you are leading a team of creative professionals, there are certain dynamics you must be aware of, and if you're not aware of them, you can forfeit your leadership platform without even knowing. And you can create an environment in which creative people, instead of thriving, they feel squelched. So what I would like to talk with you about today is, what is it that creative people need from their leadership? How is it that you can be the leader that creative people need in order to get the ideas on the table that lead to better, more brilliant work? So there are 2 things I know for certain in my life. The first is, how many of you have ever heard the phrase that leading creative people is like herding cats? Probably, yeah. I think it's wrong. I think it's actually wrong, and maybe even a little bit offensive. I think it's actually more like herding tigers, right? Because these are powerful, strategic, and majestic beings, and if you lead them well, they're capable of incredible beauty. If you lead them poorly, they're capable of ripping you to shreds. So we have to be very careful in how we lead creative people. That's the first thing I know. The second thing I know for certain is that southern heat will cause you to make some of the worst decisions of your life. Right? And the situation I have in mind, the particular locale, was Disney World. My family stopped in to a gift shop to get out of the heat. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to avoid gift shops at all costs because I believe they're designed for the sole purpose of grabbing me by the ankles and shaking me upside down to see what's left in my pockets, right? But we walked into the gift shop to get out of the heat, and as I'm standing there under an air conditioning duct, I look up and I happen to see what I have since come to refer to as the perfect t-shirt. And I'm going to show it to you and describe to you why I think it's the perfect t-shirt. It's called How to Draw Darth Vader. And the first panel says, start with the head and body. The second panel says, add a cape. Okay, so far so good. The third panel, draw the face, gloves, and boots. So far so good. Fourth panel, add details and some shading. Finished. Right? I think I laughed so hard I snorted right there in the store. I did. I think this is the perfect t-shirt for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just funny. Come on, it's just funny, right? But second of all, I think this is often how we talk about leadership, isn't it? You know, we like to offer these big edicts, these big principles. Have a vision, hire the right people, put the right people in the right place, and voila, brilliant work pops out the other side. Amazing. How does it feel to do brilliant work? Is it leadership easy? No. As you and I know, all of the magic happens between panels 3 and 4. All of the brilliant work is produced between panels 3 and 4. And for those of us who are in the grind, those of us who live between panels 3 and 4, it can be really difficult to know, what do I do in a circumstance where I'm uncertain? What is it my team needs from me in order to have the freedom and the capability to bring ideas to the table, to bring the best of who they are to the table? So over the course of our time together, I want to talk about what it's like between panels 3 and 4, and specifically what it feels like for creative people in the midst of the fray. and what it is we can do as leaders to help them have what they need in order to do their best work. Because leadership, as much as we like to talk about leadership as being on top, and that's how we often describe leadership, leadership isn't about being on top. Leadership is about being in the middle. It's about being in the middle. You and me and Jimmy Eat World and Jan Brady, we're in the middle. That's where we live as leaders, because we have to deal with pressure down. Pressure down, saying, make it great now. Deliver results now. Make it what it needs to be now. I don't care what it takes. Make it what it needs to be. And so we as leaders, we have to deal with that pressure. But we're also dealing with pressure up, right? When are you going to listen to my idea? When am I going to be in line for a promotion? Why wasn't I invited to that meeting? Why don't you take my opinion into consideration? Let's try this thing that feels a little bit risky. I don't know, because I'm feeling pressured down to make it great now. And if we try this risky thing, what's going to happen if it fails? What's that going to say about me? This is where we live as leaders, and especially as leaders of creative people. We live in the middle, which raises an interesting question. Why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody want to lead? Because this is really what it is, to lead creative people. You see, I think everyone wants to be the leader, but far fewer people are willing to do what it actually takes to lead between panels 3 and 4. Far fewer people are willing to make the hard decisions when they're facing pressure down and pressure up, to do what it is their team needs to produce brilliant work. So what does a good leader of creative people do? A good leader of creative people accomplishes the work. And by the way, this is where most people put a period, right? Accomplishes the work, period. But that's only part of our job as a leader of creative people. A good leader of creative people accomplishes the work while developing the team to tackle new and more challenging work. If you cannot include all of these qualifiers when you consider how you're leading your team, then you're not leading your team effectively. Over the course of time, your team will grow bored and they'll seek better horizons. Or worse, they'll just clam up. They won't bring their ideas, they won't bring their opinions to the table if they don't sense that you're providing all 3 of these in the course of your leadership. Well, how do we do this? How do we provide what creative teams need? Well, we have to make the mental leap from what I call a maker mindset to a manager mindset. When you're in a maker mindset, it's all about doing the work. How many of you started your career, probably most of you, as a tactician, as somebody who primarily did the work every day? That's what you do, right? And you were really great at doing the work. As a matter of fact, you were so great that you got promoted into higher and higher levels of responsibility. But as you get promoted into higher levels of responsibility, it's no longer your job to do the work. It's your job to lead the work, which is a fundamentally different skill set. And this is where many leaders make mistakes, especially early in their career, is that they fail to make this mental leap from maker to manager, from realizing I don't just own the work, I own everything, the culture, the team. Oh yeah, the work, but the culture and the team as well. So we have to make this transition from maker to manager. How do we do that? What is it that the creative people on our team need from us in order to thrive? 2 things, primarily. The first is stability. Creative people need stability. There's a myth about creative people that they only want freedom. It's all about the idea. They just want to go wherever the muse takes them, right? But this is a myth. It's not true. Creative people need boundaries. They need stability. They need a clear platform. They need two things as it relates to stability from you. First of all, they need clarity, even in the midst of uncertainty, because uncertainty is going to be your companion in doing creative work. They need clarity from you. What is it you expect from me? When do you expect it? Where are the rails for my work? So they need clarity in the midst of uncertainty, and they need protection from you. They need to know that if they take a risk and they fail, that you have their back. So in order to do brilliant creative work, creative people need stability, but they also need challenge. Challenge means that they feel permission. that they're given an open field to speak their mind, that you're inviting their ideas, you're inviting their opinion. Now, here's the problem. Stability and challenge exist in tension with one another, right? So as you increase stability, you tend to decrease challenge. And as you increase challenge, you tend to destabilize the organization. So as a leader, as a manager of creative people, your job is to keep your eye on the stability and challenge that you're issuing to your team and ensure that you're setting the dials right. And by the way, this might have to happen on an individual basis, not just on a team basis, but you need to know what each individual on your team needs from you. Because if they're not getting what they need from you, then your team is going to go off the rails. If there's low stability but high challenge, your team is going to get angry. They're going to be frustrated. This is a shooting star organization. You're going to get a lot done, but your team is going to grow frustrated with you because they don't understand what the expectations are, because a meteor comes in at the last minute and blows up all of the plans. There's no stability. It's difficult for creative people to bring their heart, their soul to the work when they know everything might change at the last minute. Of course, when there's low stability and low challenge, your team's going to be lost. They have no clue what they're supposed to do, right? And this isn't going to work for us. When there's low challenge and high stability, your team is going to feel stuck. Yeah, we're producing work. Yeah, we're cranking things out, but I don't feel challenged. And brilliant, talented, creative people are going to see greener pastures when this happens. Of course, what we want is to have the right level of stability and the right level of challenge for our team. This is where creative people thrive. So how do we do this? How do we create the right level of stability and challenge for our team? There are a million things we could talk about, but I'm going to talk about four. Four things that we can do as leaders of creative people to provide the right level of stability and challenge. The first is we have to earn the right to lead them. People will follow you because of your rank. People will follow you because of your title. But just because you have their obedience doesn't mean you have their heart. Just because you have their obedience doesn't mean you have their ideas. Doesn't mean you have their full effort, their full attention. You have to earn the right to lead your team every day if you want them to bring their best ideas to the table. So I think this raises an interesting question that we all should ask of ourselves. Why should people follow you? I mean, really, why should people follow you? By the way, this is not a trick question. Not a trick question. I want you to tick through a couple of reasons in your mind why you think people should follow you. Why should the people on your teams follow you? And you probably think something like, well, because I'm a good person. Because I care about them. Because I care about the work. And those are great things. There's nothing wrong. You probably are a good person. You probably do care about the work. You probably do care about your team. That's fine. But those are all intentions. And your team can't see intentions. Your team can only see actions. Teams don't follow intentions. They follow you based upon what you do. So here's a second thought exercise. I want you to think of a leader who has had a tremendous impact on your life. Think of someone who has transformed the way you think about leadership. And consider some of the qualities of that person. What is it about that person that resonated deeply with you? And I suspect, especially if it was a person who encouraged you to bring ideas to the table, somebody who encouraged you to bring your full creative self to the table, I suspect that at the base of all of those qualities that you're ticking off in your mind is this word trust. Trust is the currency of creative teams. Brilliant creative work is impossible without trust between leaders and the people on the team. But trust is really difficult to maintain. It's easy to gain, but it's also easy to lose. It's easy to forfeit. And we often forfeit it in ways we don't even realize. So we tend to think of trust like a bank account. We put a little bit of trust in. We can take a little bit of trust out. You know, if occasionally we don't live up to our word, it's totally fine, no problem, because we've still got a positive balance. But trust doesn't work that way, especially on creative teams. Trust doesn't work like a bank account. Trust is more like a water balloon. You fill it up, and if you puncture it even one time in a small way, you begin to lose it everywhere. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you're working on a project, everything seems to be going really well, and then you have a major blow up at the last minute, right before a critical moment, you have a major blow up on the team, a major lack of trust. And you think, well, what's going on? What happened? You say, well, you said you were going to bring bagels to the meeting 3 weeks ago, and you didn't bring bagels. Why weren't there bagels, right? Silly example, but it's the little things we do that forfeit trust, and we forfeit trust everywhere when this happens. Most of us probably aren't blowing trust in the big ways. We're not overtly lying to our team. It's little things we do that cause us to lose the trust we need to lead them when we want them to be creative. And most of them, I believe, are tied directly to insecurity. Your greatest potential to do damage to your team as a leader is directly tied to your biggest insecurity. Whatever the thing is that you're feeding through your leadership position, the thing that you're trying to get, or maybe wanting to be liked by the team, or wanting to make a popular decision, those are the places where you have the most potential to do maybe even irreparable damage to your team. And there are a couple of very common places that we do this, where we forfeit trust in a way that creative people can no longer follow us. The first is what I call declaring undeclarables. So a couple of years ago, there was a bear spotted in southern Ohio, where we live. We're from Ohio. No whoops. That's okay. It's all right. Go Bucks. No, oh, sorry. I can't say that here. That's fine. So a bear was spotted in southern Ohio. And so my kids were rightly freaked out, right? Like, we don't get a lot of bears in southern Ohio. It's not a common thing. But the bear was like 100 miles away. You know, it was like 2 or 3 counties over. But the news was all over it. There's a bear in Ohio. Hide your children, right? It's kind of the way the news was reporting it. And so my kids are freaking out. They're envisioning like the bear like climbing up the side of our house and breaking into the window and like eating them in their sleep. And so like a good dad, I said, listen, that bear is 100 miles away. There is not a chance in the world that bear is going to come within, 50 miles of our house, let alone are we ever going to see that bear. There's no way you're ever going to see that bear. It's totally fine. And that calmed my kids. They were perfectly satisfied with that answer. 2 weeks later, I pull out of my driveway. I take a right. I go to the bottom of our street. And there's a news crew camped out at the bottom of our street. And I roll down my window. I say, what's going on? They said, you're not going to believe it. 2 joggers just saw the bear cross the street 15 minutes ago. It's in the creek, playing in the creek right now. And I could see the bear in the creek at the bottom of our street. The creek where my kids play. Over the next 2 weeks, the bear was seen frolicking in the neighbor's garbage, terrorizing pets, running around our neighborhood, till finally it disappeared and went back. We don't know where it went back to Kentucky, whatever, right? Let's just say that Dad lost a little bit of credibility with the whole bear incident, right? For about 3 months after that, I would say something like, hey, we're going to go here for dinner tonight. Dad, is that really true, or is that kind of like the bear thing? No, it's really true. It's really true. But listen, we do the same thing as leaders. We will declare undeclarables because it gives us resolution in the moment. We are absolutely going to go with your idea for this next project. Oh, you're absolutely done with that project. You don't have to do anything else. It's completely done. And then something changes, and now I need you to work late tomorrow night to finish this project, right? We declare undeclarables, and we can't guarantee we're going to deliver results. Is there a place where you are declaring undeclarables because you're playing a dangerous game? You are risking forfeiting the trust of your team, and often it's out of insecurity. We want to resolve it in the moment to make ourselves feel good, to make the team feel good, but we're playing a dangerous game if we can't guarantee results. So that's the first area where we breach trust. The second is being a superhero. I think many leaders, and especially new leaders that I've talked to and interviewed, and I've seen this over and over again, they feel like in order to gain the trust of their team, they have to act like they have all of the answers. They have to act like they know what they're doing, even when they don't know what they're doing. And we think that this earns trust from the team, but actually it forfeits trust from the team. If we want to build a mesh of trust with creative people, we need to invite them into our decision-making process. Now, we can't confuse the right to have input with the right to make decisions. It's very important that we draw those boundaries for our team. But we have to invite people into our decision-making process, and we have to change our mind from time to time, which is sin number 1 in today's world, right? What do they call you when you change your mind? You're a flip-flopper, right? You're a waffler. But I think it's a sign of integrity, and it actually earns trust. If you have a reason for changing your mind, it actually earns trust rather than forfeiting it. So, is there a place where you're being a superhero, where you're blocking people out? And how can you invite them into your decision-making process? This is a way of building trust with creative people. And the third way that we forfeit trust, often unknowingly, is engaging in what I call relational usury. So usury in financial terms is when I know that you're in a desperate situation, so I'm going to loan you money at a ridiculous rate of interest because I know you're desperate enough to pay it. Well, there are people on our team who are desperate for attention, for promotions, to work on significant projects, and we know that they're desperate for that from us. And it's really easy for us to make promises to them in the moment that we know we can never deliver on because we know that they're desperate for our attention. And when we do that, we breach trust not just with them, but with everyone around them. Are you engaging in relational usury? So this is the first thing we have to do. Everything as a leader of creative people is hinged on trust. Without trust, creative teams cannot function. The second thing we have to do if we want to lead creative people effectively is we have to loosen our grip. And this is a message for control freaks like me. I'm a control freak. I like to make things the way they need to be. It's difficult for me to loosen my grip, but I've come to learn over time that if I don't loosen my grip, if I don't set rails and let the team have some autonomy within it, I'm going to lose them forever. So what does this mean? Let me illustrate this by uttering the most terrifying words ever uttered by a human being. Let me show you a magic trick I just learned, okay? I'm going to put 5 cards up on the screen. I want everyone to choose one card. Focus on one card. I'm going to mind meld with you. Everybody have your card? All right, I'm going to remove the cards. Now, I have done a tremendous amount of research about the psychology of the people in this room. And I think I have predicted with great precision which card most of you have chosen. So I'm going to put 4 of those cards back up on the screen. How many people see your card? Nobody? 5 people? Greatest trick ever. Thank you. Have a great day. Actually, these are 4 entirely different cards than the ones I put up the first time. Those of you who raise your hands, come see me after. I have people I can refer you to, no problem. It's fine, right? Why did this trick work? It worked because I gave you a problem to solve, and you performed brilliantly, with a few exceptions. You performed brilliantly. You did. But in so doing, you ignored the context. Many of you didn't notice when the situation changed because you were so focused on solving the problem I gave you. And this is why control is so insidious, because people stop thinking on your team. When you control the work, when you make decisions for them, when you think for them, they stop thinking for themselves. And then when the problem changes, they don't know how to fix it. They don't know how to react because they haven't learned how to think. You see, we think that control brings us closer to the team. Hey, I'm going to come. I'm going to align myself with you. I'm going to get in the fray with you. I'm going to do the work with you. We think this is bringing us closer to the team. But from the perspective of creative people, it actually looks like we're aligning ourselves with the organization. What they want is more important than you having what you need to be able to do your best work. As we control, we begin to lose our team. So we have to learn to lead by influence, which is about principle, not by control, which is about presence. We have to transition to an influence mindset rather than a control mindset, which means we have to establish a point of view. And I heard this over and over and over again from leaders I interviewed for this new book. You have to have a leadership philosophy. You have to have a personal leadership philosophy that you communicate to your team to tell them, this is what I expect from you. Here's when I expect it. Here's why I expect it. And if you operate within these bounds, you're going to be fine. This is how we provide the space our team needs to be able to do its best work. Well, what does this look like? What does it mean? Dee Hock, the founder and chair emeritus of Visa, said, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. Was that applause? I don't know. So what we want to do is establish simple and clear principles within which our team can operate, and then step back and let them do the work. And step in only when we need to, or only when they need us to. So what is your leadership philosophy? And we're going to be doing a lab on this in a little bit. What is your leadership philosophy? Have you established a philosophy by which you will lead people? For example, what's your philosophy on quality of work? How do you know when something is good enough? Have you defined that for your team? If not, they might keep working out of insecurity and, okay, I'll keep working, right? If they don't know how to define good work, they're not going to know when they're finished. There's going to be a lot of wasted resources. So what is your leadership philosophy on quality of work? What's your philosophy on risk and failure? A lot of leaders love to say, oh, we take risks. We're a risk-taking organization. And the moment somebody fails, they snap down on them. How could you do that? Why would you do that? And it's like a dog hitting an invisible fence, right? It's like, whoa, I'm not going there again. And they go over and they hide in the corner. What is your philosophy on risk and failure? What happens if somebody fails? Tom Peters once quoted an Australian businessman and said, we want to reward mediocre success and punish excellent failures. No, opposite way. We want to punish excellent failures and reward mediocre success. I was making sure you're paying attention. Yes, right? Reward excellent failure, punish mediocre success. What is your philosophy on risk and failure? And then, how do you know when you've come up with the right idea? Do you have a philosophy about that? Have you communicated that with your team? What does that look like? Who gets credit? Who gets credit when the work is accomplished? Is it the team? Is it the individual? Is the person doing the work? Right? Who gets credit? What's your philosophy on that? What about conflict? How is conflict handled? Listen, conflict is a natural and normal part of talented, creative people bumping into one another. It is. If there's no conflict on your team is remarkably unhealthy. It is, because if you have talented, creative people around, you're going to have a conflict of ideas and passions and interests and perspectives, and you want that. But how you handle that conflict is everything. If there's no conflict, it means people are phoning it in. It means there's no accountability. It means people really don't care. So what is your philosophy on how conflict is handled? Hey, handle it between yourselves. Hey, bring it to me. Let's handle it in a team context. How do you expect conflict to be handled when they arise? And then finally, opportunity. Who gets opportunity? Who gets promoted? How do you get on my radar? What impresses me as a leader? Have you communicated this to your team? Because here's the thing. You have a leadership philosophy. Whether you know it or not, you have one. If you're leading people, it just may not be articulated. Your team is inventing a leadership philosophy for you, whether you have clearly articulated it or not. Because their experience of you is their experience of the organization. There is no organizational culture and then your culture. Their experience of you is their experience of the organization. And so how you define expectations for them defines expectations on behalf of the organization. And where you haven't clearly articulated a leadership philosophy, ghost rules will emerge. And ghost rules are invisible, unspoken rules about who can say what to whom, who can introduce an idea, who can't introduce an idea, who is welcome in the meeting, who's not welcome in the meeting. These are ghost rules that limit behavior. And by the way, ghost rules exist in all of the same places that your leadership philosophy should exist. So where you have not clearly articulated expectations to create stability and challenge for your team, ghost rules will emerge. So are there any ghost rules that you're experiencing on your team? And how can you replace them with a clearly articulated leadership philosophy? The third thing is, if you want your team to produce brilliant work and you want to create stability and challenge, you have to defend their space to do so. You have to lessen your obsession with efficiency and instead focus on how do I create an environment in which brilliant ideas can emerge, knowing those ideas are going to be more valuable in the long run than whatever temporal gains we get from being as efficient as possible. There are 4 finite resources that you spend on behalf of the work that you do. The first is focus. You have a finite amount of focus to spend on behalf of work. So how you allocate your finite attention is critically important. The second is assets. You have physical resources, you have financial resources, you have relational resources that you can spend on behalf of your work. So again, how you allocate those is critical. Time. Time is the currency of productivity. So how you spend your time is critically important. It determines success or failure in many cases. And finally, energy. Energy is about protecting your team's ability to bring emotional labor to what they do. So you can maximize your time and run from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and you get to the end of the day and you need a brilliant idea and you've got nothing left to give because you've not been protecting your team's energy. To do brilliant work, your team needs not just time, not just focus, but energy. So how do we begin to do this? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that there are a couple of enemies that come against us. The first is what I call unnecessary complexity. Unnecessary complexity are ridiculous rules, ridiculous regulations, ridiculous systems that get in the way. We have to jump hurdles just in order to be able to engage with our work. This is a formula I put on my office door after I tanked my first creative team. I was leading a team of about 40 people, and I led them over the cliff because I love complexity. I do. Complexity feels like progress to me. If you give me a problem, I'll hand you something really complex and say, look at how beautiful this is. Look how valuable I must be, because look at how complex this thing is. See, unnecessary complexity is often sourced in our insecurity as a leader. But all we're doing is creating hurdles that creative people have to jump in order to do their best work. So where are you creating unnecessary complexity? Listen, our work is inherently complex. So you can only reduce it so far, but I'm saying, are you creating unnecessary complexity for your team or for your organization? The second is expectation escalation, which looks something like this. Hey, Joe, way to hit your nut. You not only did what we expected, you did 120% of what we expected. That was fantastic. Congratulations. By the way, 120% is your new baseline. Hey, you not only did 120, you did 140%. That's amazing. Congratulations. 140% is your new baseline. And we slowly ratchet up the expectations to the point that it's all your team can do just to deliver on the results, and they never have white space in their life to think, to create. Where does innovation happen? Where does creativity happen? It happens in the white space. It happens in the gaps. But we're really good at leaders at maximizing efficiency to the point that we squeeze all of the white space out of our team's lives. So we have to be careful not to engage in expectation escalation, which means the art of creative leadership is the art of learning how to say no. In other words, it's the art of making decisions, which is what being in the middle is all about. The word decisions comes from the root word cis, which means to cut. So when we make a decision, we are cutting off options. We're saying, not that and never that. I am cutting that off. I'm removing that from your field of view so you can just focus on what I want you to do. That's what it is to make a decision. And when you defer decisions, when you fail to make a decision, when you fail to provide clarity, stability for your team, it trickles down to your team. Every failed decision on your part where you refuse to engage in a decision, that pressure just gets pushed down to your team. And they don't know how to spend their focus, assets, time, and energy on behalf of the work. So where are you failing to make a decision? Where are you deferring decisions? And how might that be affecting your team? So we have to stand in the gap to protect our team's resources, to defend their space. We have to fight upward for what our team needs, and we also have to fight downward on behalf of the organization, because there are pressures that the people leading you have that the people below you don't understand. They don't see. They don't get. They don't see all of the pressures that your leadership are facing. So you have to advocate on behalf of your leadership, but you also have to advocate on behalf of your team with your leadership and say, hey, listen, I know this seems really important, but we can't, right now we can't do this. How can we make this work in a different way? Because my team needs some space to be able to do this important thing that they've been tasked with. So you have to fight both directions. That's what it is to be in the middle. And primarily you have to fight for the attention and the time of your team. So how do we do this? How do we fight for attention? Well, a couple of things. I'm just going to give you a couple of quick tips that came out of the research for my latest book. The first one is stop relitigating decisions. Okay? When you make a decision, don't go back and relitigate that decision again, because the moment you make a decision, work is going to begin based upon the decision you made. And then somebody comes to you 2 weeks later and says, hey, let's go back and talk about that decision we made again. Well, what happens to the people who've been doing the work for the last 2 weeks? They're going to feel used, they're going to feel abused, they're going to feel like you've wasted their life, and you have. So we need to stop relitigating decisions, which means we need to get the stakeholders in the room, make a decision, make sure they understand the consequences of that decision, and then move on. But we need to stop relitigating decisions. The second thing is Can we please stop copying every single person in the organization on every single email that we send? Please, for the love of God, let's please do this. Why? Because every time somebody gets an email, they're wondering, am I supposed to do something with this? What does this mean to me? And if they get enough emails in a row where they're the 67th person copied on the email, if they get enough of those in a row, they're going to stop paying attention. I mean, they might scan it out of courtesy, but they're going to stop asking, what do I need to do with this? You should only put things in front of people that they need to see at that given point in time, that they need to make a decision on, where you want their input on that email. So let's please protect their attention by only putting things in front of them that they need to see. And then let's limit the project horizon. There are things coming up that your team doesn't need to know about yet. Limit the project horizon. They only need to know what you expect from them and when you expect it. They don't need to know what's coming up 6 months, a year and a half from now. So we have to protect their attention by limiting the project horizon. And then finally, again, necessary meetings, necessary people. And this came up over and over again in the research. I had a copywriter named Allie who was writing an email on behalf of a client, and she said, there were 17 people in the strategy meeting. 17 people, and 2 of us were doing the work. But by the end, I had 7 pages of notes that everybody wanted represented in this 450-word email that we were going to send out. And in the end, basically, we just said, well, let's just do what we want to do, right? It didn't really matter. So protect your team's attention by putting necessary people in the room at necessary times. What does that look like for you? A lot of times as leaders, we don't do that because we want to cover our own rear, right? That's why we invite everybody. So how can you think strategically about the meetings that you're calling? And then how do we protect time? What does this look like for us? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to build buffers. Why are our meetings by default 60 minutes? Who decided that? Microsoft? Google? Who got to decide that meetings are 60 minutes, right? Why not 40 minutes? Why not 37 minutes? Let's make sure that we're building buffers throughout the course of our day so our team has time to process, to think about what they've just experienced before re-engaging with something else. Or beginning and end of the day. I mean, people come screaming into the very first thing they do is they run into a meeting and they're sitting there and they're still in their commute mentally, right? Because it's really difficult to engage first thing in the day. So can we create buffers at the beginning or the middle of the day or the end of the day? How can you protect your team's time? Create the space they need to be able to process, to think about their work. The second thing is establish a no-fly zone. And I know that has a completely different meaning in this group, right? This comes out of a conversation I had with a leadership team of an organization where they established between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. every day is what they called no-fly zone time, which meant you were under organizational mandate not to interrupt someone. They had a predictable 2 hours a day to do the deep, creative work they were accountable for doing. What would that look like to know that you had predictable time in your calendar to do the work that you're tasked with without a fear of interruption? Now, there are always going to be emergencies, of course, right, because of the nature of the work that you do. But how can you create predictable time for your team to do its most important work? And then have a break the glass strategy. So if you walk through any building, you're going to see fire extinguishers, right? You're going to see behind glass in a container on the wall, it's going to say break glass in case of emergency. And they're there. It's good to know that they're there in case of an emergency. Well, we have emergencies all the time in our work, but very few of us have a break the glass strategy in case emergencies come up. So in the case of an emergency, who's going to do the work? How's the work going to get done? Where's the budget going to come from? How are we thinking about this emergency? Are you planning in advance for things to go awry? Because they will. Eventually they will. And the problem is most teams, their strategy is, well, it looks like we're working late again. And that's not a viable strategy for protecting your team's time. So we need to have a break the glass strategy. The final thing I'm going to encourage you to do as leaders of creative people is to take care of number one. As goes the leader, so goes the team. The leader is the chief dot connector. You are uniquely positioned because of your role to be able to see everything that's going on, to listen to conversations, to see ideas as they're arising, dots in your environment, and to connect those dots. To be able to say, hey, you were saying this and you were saying that. Let's combine those things. I think this is a brilliant idea. But if you're not positioning yourself, protecting yourself to be able to do that, then you're going to fail your team. You're not going to be the person who can connect those dots. If you are not inspired, you cannot inspire. So what are you doing to take care of yourself as a leader? And not just from a selfish standpoint, but for the sake of your team. What are you doing to take care of yourself? I want to give you a couple of things that you can think about. The first is protect your dot connection ability by filling your well. When do you have time? Now, I know that we're in school, right? I know we're studying. I know that you spend a lot of time studying the tactical things that you need to be able to know so that you can deliver on the charge that you've been given. I know that. I understand that. But when do you take time to fill your own well? To pursue your own curiosity? Do you have time dedicated on your calendar to pursuing curiosity, to thinking, to generating ideas, to asking questions? Because the next brilliant idea for your work is probably not going to come from staring harder at the problem. It's going to come from somewhere out there. And if you're not taking the time to fill your well, you're going to have a shallow well to draw from when the pressure is on. You can't draw water from an empty well. So are you taking time to fill your well? And by the way, this isn't just, I'm not looking for mental assent. Like, when are you going to put time on your calendar to do this? To fill your well, to commune with great minds, as Stephen Sample from USC calls it. The second thing is you need to protect your emotional well-being, which means engaging in secret work. So as create-on-demand professionals, a lot of us spend our time doing the work, solving problems that we're being tasked with solving. Somebody's looking over our shoulder, somebody's paying us to do it, and that's great. Do you have anything you do outside of your job that is feeding your creativity? It could be gardening, right? It could be woodworking. It could be working on cars. It could be watercoloring. I don't know what it is, but you need to have some way of disengaging your mind from your on-demand work and engaging your creativity in another way. It's a way to give you a chance to take risks, to try things, but more importantly, to disengage your creative problem solving from the on-demand work you're doing and engage it instead with something that's giving you a chance to explore new skills, develop yourself, continue to grow. So are you engaging in secret work as opposed to public work, which is the work you get paid to do? And then finally, you need to hone your intuition as a leader by being unreachable sometimes. Being unreachable sometimes. Is there ever a point in your life when you're unreachable? Is there ever a point in your life where you're off the grid? And so many of us these days are not, because we follow the ping everywhere it leads us. We need to learn to get alone with our thoughts, to think, to connect dots. Do you have dedicated, regimented, scheduled time on your calendar to be alone with your thoughts? Often brilliant ideas will emerge in the least expected times and places. And you need to encourage your team to do the same. So in July of 1967, a young musician was presented with the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to open for one of the most popular bands of the day. I mean, this band wasn't just popular, it was filling arenas all over the country. And so for a young, relatively unknown musician, this is quite the opportunity. So of course they said yes. The night came for the first performance. The musician walked out on stage, picked up the guitar, and started playing. But instead of cheers, there were boos. Boos as in booing, not as in, that would have been more fun. No, boos from the audience. But like a pro, the musician finished the set, continued to play, played the last song, walked off stage, completely distraught. Could you imagine how this would feel to be booed off stage? This is my big moment, right? To be booed off stage by thousands of people. But the manager said, listen, it's the first city, it's the first night, it's going to be totally different in the next city. And it was, in fact, different in the next city because on the second night of the tour, the boos began from the very first note and continued throughout the performance. And this went on the third night of the tour, and the fourth night, and the fifth night, and the sixth night, and the seventh night, until finally the eighth night of the tour, July 17th, 1967, apparently word had traveled from city to city, and before the first note was even played, as the musician was walking out on stage, the boos began and continued throughout the set. By this point, he'd had enough. As legend has it, he finished his set, put down his guitar, may or may not have waved a profane gesture at the audience, turned around, walked off stage, and quit the tour, never again to open for this massively popular band. Can you imagine how that would feel? that kind of public failure. As a matter of fact, if you were present that night, you might have thought you were witnessing one of the greatest failures in music history. It doesn't get any worse than that, but I would submit to you you're witnessing something a little bit different. If you were present on July 17th, 1967, when a young Jimi Hendrix took the stage to open for a band called the Monkees, I would submit to you you're witnessing a very natural phenomenon. You're witnessing what happens when a dangerous idea is introduced into a marketplace that craves conformity, craves similarity, craves predictability. You see, the Monkees represented the height of pop music predictability, right? Nothing wrong with the Monkees. They're fine. But there's nothing edgy, there's nothing dangerous, there's nothing new. So Monkees fans had no idea what to do with Jimi Hendrix when they saw him. But let me ask you a question. When was the last time you were at a party and somebody said, "Woo, play me some Monkees," right? Probably not. Why? Because the Monkees are safe. The Monkees are bland. Jimi Hendrix went on to transform generations of rock musicians because he refused to monkey-eyes his Hendrix music. There is something as a leader that makes you unique. There is a perspective you have, your combination of passion, skills, experiences, nobody around you has. You have to have the courage to bring that even in the face of resistance. As you face the pressure down, the pressure up, you have to bring that uniqueness. Don't allow people to round off your rough edges. Refuse to compromise the body of work that you're building. We're all building a body of work through our everyday decisions. And at some point, we're going to point to that delta, that body of work, and we're going to ask, does that represent me? Does that represent the sum of my greatest accomplishments or the sum of my greatest compromises? Did I allow everyone around me to round off my rough edges, to cause me to bring something less than what I was capable of, to compromise my perspective? We don't need more of other people. We need more of you. Your team needs more of you. In your role, you have a unique ability to bring something unique that nobody else can bring in your role of leadership. You see, many people haven't defined what that is. They don't understand who they are. They don't understand what success looks like. And so over the course of time, they just get sucked into the organizational culture, organizational expectations. Their rough edges get rounded off because they don't know they haven't defined the body of work that they're building, who they are, what they uniquely bring to the table. And so they just get sucked into the organization. We all know these people. You can't distinguish them from the organization. They're one and the same. They have monkey-eyes their Hendrix music. I love how one of my favorite thinkers, Thomas Merton, talked about this dynamic. He said, there can be an intense egoism in following everyone else. People are in a hurry to magnify themselves by imitating what is popular and too lazy to think of anything better. Hurry ruins saints as well as artists. They want quick success, and they're in such a hurry to get it, they cannot take time to be true to themselves. And when the madness is upon them, they argue that their very haste is a species of integrity. They want quick success, and they're in such a hurry to get it, they cannot take time to be true to who? To themselves, to their own perspective, to their own gut, to the uniqueness that they bring to the charge they've been given. Your team needs you to be you. So how will you define success as a leader? How will you define success in leading creative people? And you better think about that ahead of time because you don't want to be making that decision in the moment. You need to know who you are, what you bring, your unique qualities, and bring those fully to your team every day because our legacy, as much as we like to think it's the work, our legacy is not the work. Our legacy is the people that we lead. 10 years from now, when somebody asks someone at a conference in a talk, they say, hey, I want you to think of a leader. Think of a leader who has had a tremendous impact on your leadership. Somebody who has transformed the way you think about the work and about leadership. I want that to be you. I want you to be the person that they think about. Because great leaders make echoes. So I encourage you, friends, be a leader who makes echoes. And be the leader that creative people need. Thank you very much for what you do. Thank you.